Hi there, my name's John and I'm the owner of this YouTube channel. And I thought I would be a little creative today and talk about what kind of code points I would make if I were to design a code. This is something I've thought a lot about over the years. When I really got into gymnastics at the age of 18 and 19, I actually designed a couple of codes and I thought I would show you them. So I'm 32 now. Uh, when I was doing this at the age of 19, it must have been the year 2003. Here is something I considered. I toyed with the idea at one point of bringing back the value raising system that was around in the 1992 Code of Points. And this is what I came up with. Just to make this clear, when I was doing this, it was during the time when there were super E elements, and that's as high as things went. And so I invented a new category, which was ultra E. That's what these like U, U's, and so forth stand for. That would have been worth 4/10 of a point. So let's see what I came up with. I guess I was thinking that if somebody did a back handspring to 3 layouts on the balance beam, that those skills would combine and result ultimately in a G skill, which actually I would have called Ultra E at the time, for 4/10 of a point total. Let's see what I thought should happen if a gymnast did a round off into a 2-foot layout. That would be worth 3/10 total, or equivalent to an F, or what was called a super E skill. And then let's see, on floor exercise, what would happen if a gymnast did a front layout into a double front. I thought that should be an ultra E skill as well, 4/10. But the reason I toyed with value raising is because I thought this would open the door to really limitless creativity. So, what if a gymnast did a whip into a double layout? I guess I didn't really compute what that would be worth. So maybe this project was never finished, but you get the idea. Other codes that I toyed with, let's see here, this again, things that I made when I was a teenager, and I would spend many hours kind of designing these and watching gymnastics videos and testing them out and seeing how it would change the results. This was another code that I kind of based off of the idea of value raising, seeing here that like 2 skills combine and are then counted as a single skill. I guess I also toyed with some of the special requirements. This one I thought was kind of interesting. The idea that on balance beam, gymnasts should perform a single C skill that did not result in any bonus. I guess I had watched old Nadia Comaneci routine where she just did a standing back tuck, and I thought, that's kind of cool, and I wish that would return. I'm not sure that I like this requirement anymore, but at the time in the 2001 code when I was making this, it was a requirement that gymnasts do a static element like a handstand or other hold type element. Anyways, I did away with repetition rules because I wanted to see things like 3 layouts on the beam or 3 whipbacks in a row on the floor exercise. I also kind of toyed with allowing gymnasts to repeat things like whipbacks as long as they did them in sort of different types of connections. So if you did it in both an indirect connection at one point in the routine, you could repeat it and do it in a direct connection elsewhere. That was sort of kind of bringing back some of the early 90s tumbling series. And of course, I kind of toyed with changing some element values too. This was sort of based off of a 10.0 scale. So let's see here. I kind of upped the difficulty of a lot of the kind of 80s style handstand mounts like Shushinova's planche and the one-arm handstand type mounts. I sort of anticipated what would come later by, let's see here. I'm sure, I don't know if I can find it, but I'm sure I would have thought like a standing back with a full should have been a super E or F skill rather than just an E, which it was at the time. On floor exercise, yeah, I kind of predicted that a 3.5 twist should be a super E. I guess I was, being imaginative and hoping that someone would do a triple back. Increase the difficulty of a full twisting double if it was done as a half in, half out. You get the idea. Here's another sort of similar code that I toyed with. Let me make this bigger. This time I kind of did away with the value raising thing and just used the sort of standard connection type of system that we're used to now, which of course requires spelling out a lot more possible connections. So you can see, I definitely was thinking about encouraging quadruple and even quintuple acrobatic connections on the beam. Thinking of Ekaterina Szabo, who did 4 back handsprings in a row. I thought that should be worth a 10th. Dominique Dawes, who at one point in an exhibition did a back handspring into 4 layouts, I thought that should be worth 5/10. And this again was on a 10.0 scale, assuming that gymnasts would have to get, I think, 1.2 tenths in bonus. Why did I pick that number? Well, that was the number required in the code at the time. Similarly, on floor exercise, Jenny Thompson in the early 90s did 3 whipbacks into a triple twist, so I thought that should be worth 3/10 in connection, and then 2/10 for the E skill, which would have been 5/10 total, or almost half of the required bonus just from that one tumbling pass. Let's see if there's anything else that I want to kind of highlight here. Yeah, on beam, I definitely thought that acrobatic elements like back handsprings and layouts could be used infinitely with no repetition rule like we have now and have had as ever since 1997. I also thought that gymnasts should be able to do a C dismount, even the event finals, as long as it was done in a combination. I'm not sure if I still feel that way, but whatever. Okay, so actually before we move on, I do kind of want to see what I was thinking in terms of vault. I guess I felt like the Macintosh vault, a front handspring layout full, should be a 9.9. It was a 9.8 at the time. I thought a Rudy should be a 10. Now you'll notice there's some vaults that have never been done that were in the code of points at the time, many of them, not all of these were. Vaults that I decided should be ultra E vaults, or in other words, above a 10.0. What I was thinking there was that they'd still be worth a 10.0, but that if you did that in the event finals, you could do a second vault from the same vault family as sort of a reward. In other words, you could do an Aminar and a Yurchenko double twist in the event finals. I'm not sure if I still think that that would be a wise idea, but I was a teenager just being creative. So let's take a look at what I think now, many years later. I just threw this together right now, so hopefully it's complete. And here I'm kind of, a little sort of emulating connections the way they were in the 96 and 2000 code of points. Although what's different from then is that I still kind of think that gymnasts should maybe get 1.2 points in bonus in order to have a 10.0 start value. Why would I go back to the 10.0 system? Well, part of the reason that it was developed was to increase between gymnasts. But if you actually look at the scores in like the event finals at the 2004 Olympics, I don't know that the scores were really that close to each other, or that people were really maxing out close to the 10.0 mark. Certainly in 92, you know, medals were decided between, a 9.95 and above, and that did not leave a lot of room for differentiation. But I remember Catalina Ponor's winning scores in Athens were in the 9.7 range, so there was certainly room to grow within the 10.0 system, and it did not need to be abandoned, in my opinion, at that point. Also, I think a 10.0 starting score forces gymnasts to focus on execution and artistry in a way that they don't really have to now, and can't because they're chasing difficulty. So I'd go back to the 10.0 and I'd go back to 1.2 tenths and bonus required. But what I would do is dramatically increase the number of connections and the value of connections, and also the value of some skills, in order to make that possible without overwhelming difficulty that distracts from the overall impression of the exercise. So here's what I do on bars. I would start connections at CC again, which has not been the case since the year 2000, and I would make that worth a tenth. But I think I would say that those C skills have to involve at least a half turn, which was the rule back in the day as well. ED connections, I would say, are worth 0.2, even if they're not both flight elements. So this sort of harkens back to the 2012 code where that was the case. And I'd also introduce a 3/10 connection for DF skills to reward gymnasts who do things like a Tkachev into a counter Kim, or like Emily Lepenik, who did a hop full into a, what is a full twisting Ginger called? A def. In men's gymnastics. And women's gymnastics, it's called a Harista Kieva. That's really all I have to say about the uneven bars, and I'll show you some routines later that I think would kind of fit the bill. So let's go to beam. When it comes to combinations of acrobatic elements and leaps, I would sort of go back to what was the case through the 2000 Olympics, that CB skills could earn a tenth of bonus, and yeah, that would be a switch leap, into a straddle jump. And that might seem too easy to get bonus, but if you have to get 12 tenths of a point total, this 1/10 really is a small contribution to that. Just like in 2000 CC, I'd make 2 tenths, and then I'd also introduce a 3/10 connection for more difficult things. This would be sort of hard to do, to link two leaps that are DE, but I suppose if you did a switch ring leap directly into a ring leap, that would be possible. Now let's move on to the tembling, and I think this should only apply to rebounding series, meaning series where momentum is built in one direction only. So I would keep this, and I would keep this. So this would be like a aerial into a back layout, would be worth 2 tenths. And I would introduce a 3/10 connection for things like Maria Livchikova's connection of a front aerial immediately into a front tuck from 2 feet. I think that should be. This is the same, and this is the same. I would also kind of expand on what's recently been introduced, separate, more difficult connections for forward rebounding skills. So I think a front handspring into a front tuck should be worth bonus, front handspring into a front pike worth more bonus, and then 3/10 for connections like Livchikova's that I've already mentioned. For connections of forward elements that are of the step out variety, so front aerial into aerial, a nodi into front aerial, I think that those should only be worth 1/10. I don't just intuitively difficult as connections that are rebounding. Now I'd also kind of keep and expand upon the idea of series bonus. If you do 3 skills in a row, and one of them is at least a C skill or higher, I think you should get a 10th of bonus for that. So that means that the back handspring layout would be worth 2/10 total in bonus, which was not the case in the year 2000 or 2004. But then I think longer connections should also get more bonus accordingly. So what would happen with a back handspring into 3 layouts? Well, I think that should be worth 4/10 total, or 1/3 of the total bonus needed. How would that happen? Well, you would get 2 of these and 1 of these. I don't think there should be any repetition rules, which is what this should say, not that it really matters. Repetition, well, no, you get the idea. No repetition rules for things like back handsprings, round-offs, or layout step-outs. Why? Because to me, this is what Beam is all about. Long, breathtaking, impossible connections. I don't think we should limit that by limiting the number of back handsprings and layouts that can be used. And I would keep the idea of bonus for connecting turns as well. So let's move to the floor. This is what I would sort of say for direct connections. I would go back to 2000 and give people 1/10 of bonus for connecting a front layout full into a front tuck. Maybe that's too easy to warrant bonus, but this is about increasing diversity, and 1/10 is just a drop in the bucket towards the total needed. Similarly, that would mean a DA direct connection would also be worth 1/10 of a point, so a 2.5 twist into a front tuck. BD, let's say, could be worth 2/10 though, and CD, let's make worth 3. AE connections, I think, should be worth 2/10 just like they are now, but I would increase the difficulty for EB to reward people who do things like front layouts into double fronts. And I would also introduce another 3/10 connection for something like a whip into a double layout or a double layout punch front. And maybe even consider something like 4/10 of a bonus for a whip into a G skill. Similar to the year 2000, I would say that 2 C skills would be worth 2/10 of a point, and that just kind of flows logically from this first connection. Now for the indirect connections, here's what I envision. This would be the same. 2 whipbacks into a triple twist would be the same as it is now. I think, I'm sorry, I think I meant that this should be worth 1/10. Something like a 1.5 twisting back layout, round off back handspring, 2.5 twist, I think should be worth 1/10 in bonus. This is new though. I think if someone does a front tuck, round off back handspring, full in, that they should get 1/10 of bonus for that. Similarly to whipbacks through to a triple twist, 2/10, and so on, to encourage the Kim Zemeskel style 3 whipback series. Also, I think, now this would have been the case in the year 2002, I think, a 1.5 twist through to a double twist maybe should get 1/10 of bonus. And then 2/10 of bonus like it is now for a C skill through to an E skill. Okay, now something else I'm kind of thinking about is what happens if a gymnast wants to do a whip back through to a 2.5 twist punch front? That would not get any bonus under the current connections that I've specified. Why? Well, I mean, they would get the DA connection, but they wouldn't get any additional credit for doing the whip back. And remember, gymnasts like Andrea Radican and Simona Amanar did that exact connection in the year 2000. That single layout wouldn't be worth anything. They'd have to do, I'm sorry, 2 whipbacks through to the 2.5 twist to get 1/10 of bonus for that, and then they'd get another 1/10 for the front tuck. So there's sort of that omission of what happens if they just do one layout, or I don't know why I'm calling it a layout, a whipback. So I think maybe there should be this idea of series bonus, kind of like on beam, for longer or unusual connections on the floor exercise that are not otherwise credited through these existing connections. So that would mean a whip back through two, a 2.5 twist punch front would be worth 2/10 in connection total. And then I would sort of bring back something that is missing now, the idea that if you connect a C skill and a D skill, whether it is a turn or a leap, as long as it is an immediate connection, that you should get a 1/10 of bonus for that. So that would be something like a 1.5 twisting split leap into a popa, which I think is still a C skill. Maybe it's only a B. This is sort of what it was like in the year 2002. So that's basically it. I still would keep the idea that bonus starts at a D skill, which would be worth a 1/10 of a point, and I would still keep skills that go all the way up through I. So that means if you did an F skill, you'd get 3/10, G skill would be 4, H would be 5, and so on, out of that 12/10 needed total. Obviously, I'd be doing away with a bit of repetition rule on floor exercise by allowing people to do more than 2 whip backs or something like that in combination. Something for people like Ellie Black, I think D through D should be 0.3, D through E, because at one point she did a triple twist after the 2.5 twist, that should be worth 0.4. And so on and so forth. So if a gymnast came up with a new and difficult connection not listed here, it would be credited kind of along the same lines as the previous ones. So let's look at some actual routines and see how they would stack up in my code of points. So front layout mount should be a D for 1/10 so far. Now that series, let's see, she gets a 1/10 for the D skill, she gets 2/10 for connecting the D to the first C, another 1/10 for the second C to the third, and then she gets another 1/10 for a series of 3 elements. So that total series would be worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/10, 4 of connection and 1 of difficulty. So she has 5 total so far. Now this next series will be a G skill worth 0.4 connected to a B skill for 0.2. So that's 6/10 plus 5. She's at 11. So she's nearly done. I don't think there's any difficulty that comes until the dismount, which will be an F skill connected to 2 B skills. So that would also be worth 4/10, because that would fall under the series bonus, which would apply to dismounts. So she is actually over a 10.0 in my book, but I would be more than happy to see a routine like that now. So let's see how a bars routine that I enjoy would stack up under this code of points. Well, okay, this is a bad example because she falls. So I want to see like her event finals bar routine. Okay, so that is a D-D connection in my book, which should be worth 3/10 total. 2 for the individual D skills and 1 for the connection. That would be an E skill into a D skill. So that would be worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So she is at 8 total so far. That's an E skill, so she's now up to 10 tenths. And that dismount would be a D skill, I say, and so she has a 9.9 start value for that routine. Let's look at a floor routine. Oh, I guess we have to watch a commercial first. Okay, so this first tumbling pass is going to be an A skill out of an E skill, so that's 4 tenths total. She's a third of the way there. And this series, like I said before, I think should be worth 5 tenths total. So now she's at 9. And to kind of fast forward, final series is going to be worth 2 tenths, I think. 2.5 twist into a punch front. So that would be a 9 plus 2 is 11, so that's a 9-9 routine in my book. Now, that would only mean, adding something like a triple turn or a D level jump would be enough to satisfy the code of points I'm proposing. Let's go way back and look at this floor routine, which was actually the last word. So, whip back, full in, punch front. First connection should be worth a tenth, 2 tenths for the E skill, and then 2 tenths for the final connection. So that's 5 tenths total. Now, one thing I forgot to mention earlier that I think I would do is, first of all, I would get rid of the requirement that people dance into the corner, get rid of the requirement that people can't stand on 2 feet in the corner. I would get rid of the requirement that people can't take a lunge when landing on the floor exercise. I would even consider adding some kind of sticking bonus. Okay, this is a C skill through to a C skill through into an A skill, so that should be worth 2 tenths in my opinion, so she's at 7 total. And I'm going to fast forward to her dismount, which is a full twisting double back, which is an E skill. And so that gets us to 9 tenths, I believe, which would be a 9-7 start value, which is pretty good for a routine that is over 20 years old. And actually, something else that I would include is I think that if gymnasts end on the floor exercise with an E skill or greater, they should get a tenth of bonus just for that. So actually this would be a 9-8 routine then. Why do I think that? Well, I'm kind of stealing that from figure skating because I know at one point in figure skating, and maybe it's still true, I don't follow that sport closely, people got additional difficulty if they did jumps after a certain point in the routine. So in the long program, for example, if you did jumps after a certain minute mark, they became more difficult. And I would do that to encourage people to do something other than a double tuck at the end of their routine and to try to do something difficult. Now, one of the best ways, I think, to put the code of points to the test is to go back to a very controversial beam final where difficulty did not win out, and maybe it should have. I forgot to mention something here. Kind of like we have now, I think that DA connection should be worth a tenth on beam. Yeah, don't want to leave that out. So I think we just saw front tuck mount. So that is a 10th in my book. That skill, I think, should stay a C. That was a CB connection, so I think that should still be worth a 10th. That's a DA connection, so that's 2/10. CB, worth 1/10. I think that skill was a C at the time, and I think it should stay that way, so no bonus for that series. But I guess if I still kept that requirement of a C skill performed in sort of isolation for no bonus, then that would satisfy that. The dismount, I'm going to say, is worth 2/10 because it's a D skill done in a series. So, start value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which would be a 9/5 start value. Now let's look at, she was the gold medalist. Let's look at the silver medalist, Corkina. Okay, so that mount I would upgrade and make an E skill. I think that full twisting back handspring should be E's. I also think that Rolfolvas or full twisting Corbets should be E skills, provided they're done in the Chinese style, meaning that the rotation is complete before the hands touch the beam, rather than in the style that Corkina is, I think, going to do it in this routine. And in which case I think it should be valued at a D. So that mount would be 2/10 for the E skill, and then it's part of a series, so I guess that's another 10th, even though that was kind of a difficult series ending with the C skill. Okay, so let's think about that. That was A, E, B. So I think she gets 2/10 for the E skill. She gets a 10th for the leap connected to it, and then she gets another 10th for doing a B skill out of it. So maybe she actually doesn't do a Rolfolva in this routine, but when she does, she kind of does it like a full twisting back handspring and then just drops down. So that, oh, there it is. Okay, so that was a CB connection, which is a 10th, and then a CD connection, which I said would be worth 2/10, and then a 10th for that kind of ugly full twisting swing down. I think the last thing will be her dismount, which in this code of points was a C, I mean a D, excuse me, and I think it should stay a C. Okay, so let's add this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I think that that should be a 9/9 start value. So it's 4/10 more difficult than Gojan's routine. Now let's look at the bronze medalist, who many people think should be won, and who would have won under a code more like today's. So that's a D skill. Okay, so that at the time was a CC connection, which would have been worth 0.2. I would upgrade the staggering leap and make it a D. So I'd say that connection is worth 3/10 total. 2 for connecting a CC skill or higher, and 1 for the D skill. Why? To encourage those Chinese style jumps on beam. Okay, so that was a G skill, full twisting layout. That's 4/10. Now it was connected immediately to a B skill, so that's a 10th. And then it's part of a triple series, so that's a 10th. So 6/10 total for that. So that would be worth 2/10 total. Triple series that includes a CC connection. Now that, I think, is the proper way to do that skill, which is why I would say that version is an E. And she connected it to a jump, a B skill, which would give her another 10th. Now I think the only thing that's coming up is her dismount, which is going to be a D skill. So let me add this up while that's happening. Okay, so I count 16/10 total, which is too much. So she could have a 10.0 start value in my book, and quite a bit of what we saw. What could she maybe take out? Well, she could have nixed the full twist maybe and just done a layout. I think that would have been sufficient. So who would be the winner under my code of points? Well, I don't know. I guess I'd have to look at exactly the deductions, but I wonder, the way I'm doing it, I kind of think that maybe I would have put Corkina as the winner because she had a 9.9 start value and very minimal deductions, whereas Kui Yuan would have started a 10th higher but had several visible deductions. So that is the gist of it. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.